Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick. This is MSFS Flight Plans, and I am happy to report that I am back. Well, we're back. We're all back together. I thought I was going to have to go back to 2020 earlier this week because last weekend, for all of last weekend, 2 straight nights of me trying to get into 2024, I couldn't do it. I was stuck on the dreaded loading screen. There was nothing I could do to get back. I had uninstalled, reinstalled, cleared out all the directories. Nothing was working, so I reinstalled 2020, figuring I had no choice but to go back to 2020, which was just killing me. And I figured one more time, before I removed 2024, I'd try to get back in here. Hopped in, started right up with both sims installed, and it's worked every time since then. So we are going to keep plowing forward in 2024. And I can now do that a little bit more confidently. I have found what was wrong with the photogrammetry, which was a massive victory for me. I'll tell you guys about that once we get up in the air. But above and beyond that, more and more of the planes, well, I'm finding more planes that are at least functional. A lot of them still don't work fully, as I'm sure you guys already know. But I'm finding a lot that do work. Is my camera set? Yeah, that was good. And little NavMap is working for the most part. If you haven't seen my most recent video about that, I had to make some changes to that first video that I put up because I was finding that it didn't work quite right with all of the planes. All right, I'm just giving it some full mix here. Turn the pump off. Let me just get through this real quick. And then start her up. There we go. All right, and the fuel set for the center position. Very good. Avionics on. And turn that starter off. Okay. So that's working. I finally got the map enhancement to working, which might have been part of the problem with why I couldn't get the sim to load. A lot of things are just starting to come together, and I almost feel like every time I get in the sim, something new is working, which is actually giving me something to look forward to. I know there are still all kinds of problems, and I totally get it if you just want to stay in 2020 until more of that stuff gets sorted out. The big thing for me, as I've said over and over and over again, and I am now ashamed to admit I said it, wait till you hear what was wrong with the graphics, was that none of the photogrammetry cities look good, which did not work well for us. I was figuring if they're going to look better in 2020, we'll just go back to 2020. But then I found out what I, not a Sobo, was doing wrong from the very beginning. And if you guys are still finding that most of your photogrammetry cities don't look great, we're going to fly at 2,500 for this trip. By the way, I'm just setting up our autopilot here. Well, hold on. Let's look at the map real quick, and then I'll tell you all about my humiliation, which I've done plenty of times, so I'm very used to being publicly humiliated. So we're going to fly in Lisbon, Portugal today, which, speaking of things being better in 2020, was a flight I was all prepared to take in 2020. Now we're going to take it in 2024, obviously. The reason we never took it in 2020 is because when you get downtown here, and if you fly around here with the photogrammetry turned on, you will see there are some big spikes in the graphics, like literal spikes sticking up out of the air. One of them is at a tower down here, and another one at a big stadium up here. Just until you get right over it, in 2020, there are huge spikes in the scenery unless someone's gone in there and fixed that. So I shelved that one after doing my notes and everything. I already had all the bookmarks in here. Well, now those are fixed, and for the most part, with the exception of this area right here, which I'll tell you about in just a minute, it looks really, really good. In fact, these beaches are some of the best beaches that I've seen anywhere. When you get down close to them, like we'll be, you can actually see all these people down here and all the little cliffs and stuff. It looks really, really good. So our route, if you saw that little NavMap video, I was actually drawing out the flight plan for this. In that video, I was coming out this way and then coming down here to see these first 2 landmarks. The photogrammetry appears to start right around wherever this road is. It covers everything south of that all the way over here to at least this big bridge. So everything within our flight path, and then at least the northern part of this little peninsula here is also photogrammetry, so all of it's going to look really, really good once we get past this area. But the reason why I redrew this over here is that this whole side of this mountain, really the whole thing, has got patches of the blob trees for some reason, and they kind of extend down into this area. Not sure what's up with that, and I really can't remember whether that was also the case in 2020, but everything else is going to look really, really good. And this is a neat city, because check out all these forts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. More forts over here, more forts over here. We got at least 4 giant stadiums, all kinds of incredible stuff to see. We got a huge statue of Jesus over here, and I'll mention it now in case I forget to mention it later. As we're coming in for our final, we're not going to be able to see the big Navy base down here. This also looks pretty cool. You can see all the ships and everything down there. So if you want to adjust this flight plan, which of course will be included in the video description as always, just come over here and check that out. It looks pretty neat too, but we're coming in on this runway, so maybe if you want to swing past that and land on runway 1, that would work for you if you want to check out the base. But the whole trip's about 46 nautical miles, probably about 30 minutes in the air, I think. And we're taking the 172 because this is one of the handful of planes that I've found where all of the avionics are working for the most part. A lot of them are not loading up properly. In other words, you set up your flight plan, even in the EFB, and it's just not bringing it in. It's doing a direct flight from point A to point B in a lot of planes. A lot of them, the buttons are inverted, so the up goes down, the down goes up for the range. The vertical speed dial's messed up in a lot of them. So far, it seems like everything is working like it should here in the 172. So I'm putting it on my list of planes that are working for now. If you haven't flown it yet, it's working. And the Caravan that we flew over Guatemala also seems to be working just fine. So let's start taxiing, and then I'll tell you about what an idiot I am. Let's see here. So taxi lights on, parking brake off, and we'll start moving. So I just couldn't figure out, if you saw that first review flight I took, which was only the second flight I ever took, it was the day that I loaded the sim for the first time, the day it was released. We flew over San Francisco, New York City, and Ethiopia, which I thought were 3 of the best looking sites in 2020, and if you saw that video, you know I was not happy about it. It did not look good. And so I flew over all kinds of other cities. Auckland, if you saw that flight, looked amazing, absolutely amazing. So I figured there must just be something wrong with all those other cities. But it was like every other city I was flying over looked pretty rough compared to 2020. Well, then one of the guys on our Discord server said, hey, by the way, Nick, are you using that dynamic FPS setting? And I had to think about that. I was like, I don't even know where that is, but it's right above the main graphics setting where you can adjust everything. It's the line right above that. It's just an on-off switch where you can set your FPS target. And like many of you, when I first got in the sim, I just cranked all the graphics up to see how the performance was, and I thought, well, that's kind of a novelty. I'll just set that at like 40 for the target, turn it on, and what that's actually doing, which I probably should have considered if I'd just taken a second to think about it. If you remember when we were flying over New York City, I was just astounded that the FPS was like up to 50. It was unbelievable. Of course, what it's doing is there's got to be a give and take with that, so it's throttling the data for the graphics on the ground in order to keep the frame rates that high. And that's exactly what the problem was. So if you want to see photogrammetry as it's intended to look in 2024, turn that thing off. You'll have to go in there and dial down your graphic settings to more sane levels. They're about where they were in 2020 for me, so I just kind of reset them to where they were there, and now everything looks great. There's still some areas where you're going to get the flat trees and things like that that were not there in 2020, but as all the modders start coming in, and by the way, all of our 2020 flights, at least for the last 10 or so, I had the map enhancement installed, so that was fixing a lot of that. Now that's working again, which is great, so everything's really coming together. Everything's coming together. But I need to offer an apology to anyone who cares that might have watched that first video. We had like 10,000 views on it. I was really... I wasn't viciously attacking Asobo, but I don't think I was hiding my disappointment very much when we saw all those cities. Alright, landing lights on, parking lights off, 1 notch of flaps, and transponder set, CDI set to GPS, everything's good, full mix, let's rock and roll. But I should have just assumed, because it's kind of the story of my life, that it was a user error issue. I mean, this isn't like the 1990s where you get a new CD-ROM for a game and inside the case of it they got a big instruction manual. Unfortunately, the way that all these kind of work now, particularly for complex applications like this, you just kind of have to figure out how they work by trial and error. And I'm sure, like a lot of you, I was just kind of trying to fumble my way through it, but I should have given it some more time to try to figure out other things that I might have been doing wrong, and what I was doing wrong was turning on that dynamic FPS setting. So turn that off. I deleted that original video. I don't want anyone to see that and get the wrong idea, or humiliate myself anymore by having that out there. So that's gone, and I'm only going to try to stay more positive from here on out, because I don't want people avoiding 2024. That's the way this whole thing is going. Asobo is obviously working on it. They've offered us a bunch of freebies and those 4 new legendary flyers or whatever they're called, which is an awfully nice gesture. They recognize there were some issues and some ongoing issues. I'm sticking with them. Okay, let's see if this autopilot works. Autopilot on, nav mode. Can we adjust our vertical speed? I bet I can figure that out. Let's just see. Altitude. There we go. I haven't used this old stack in a while. Okay, so flaps up. Landing lights off. Pull those RPMs back a little bit. I kind of like where they are. That's alright. We'll just stay out with the red. Alright, let's see if we make this first turn. So that being said, you want the graphics to look better in the photogrammetry, quick fix, turn off the dynamic FPS. If you're having trouble with the loading screen, Overkill Simulations uploaded a video yesterday saying, I didn't hear Asobo say this, but he said that they said, which is kind of the way that universe works right now, that they recommended if you're still working on the first installed version of 2024 from those early days, he said they said completely remove it, remove all the directories, and reinstall it because there were some corrupted files or something that may be causing you to freeze on the loading screens. So try that if you haven't done it yet. For me, unless it was just a coincidence, it seemed like having the old sim and the new sim installed at the same time was the one thing that made the difference. I don't know if it really was or not, but that's when it started working again. And I've since removed 2020 completely, and it's still working fine. All right, let's get rid of this. If you want to get rid of your EFB, by the way, I had to figure out how to do this. You touch that tiny little button on the side. It's not a big deal having it over there, but some planes it's over on the left side, and it's like huge and right here. So it's nice to be able to get rid of that. Okay, we're up in the air. This is not the photogrammetry area here, so this looks awfully defaultish, and these fields would probably even look better if I did put the map enhancement app back in, which again is working now, but it's causing a little bit of that progressive tiling as it changes the cache, because it will automatically delete the saved cache every time it starts, and I didn't want to have to worry about that on this flight. So that was Sintra Air Base that we just left from. It started life in 1914 as the Portuguese Army's School of Military Aeronautics. But in 1939, that school was shut down, and it gained the awesome title of Air Base No. 1, and became home to some ground attack bombers during the war years, despite Portugal remaining neutral through all that. Since then, they've gotten back to flight training, with this location now being home to the Portuguese Air Force Academy. And I was trying to look around down on the ground. It says on Google that there is a museum of some kind down there. I'm not sure if it's an aviation museum, like the kind with a bunch of old planes, because I didn't see any of those, so it might just be a museum for the Academy. But I looked for the planes, I didn't see any. Okay, as we come around over to the right, to the hill where all the blob trees were on the other side of it. Can we see it yet? Well, it's way off to the right. We'll turn in a minute and see it better. There's going to be two landmarks there. I'm pretty sure the bigger and more noticeable of the two is an InSim POI, but there's a smaller one just to the north of that on the northern side of the mountain that's kind of tucked down into a little pocket called the Moorish Castle. That was built by, you guessed it, the Moors in the 700s. And it appears to be in pretty good shape. I saw some pictures on the ground. You can definitely see it from the satellite map, but if you go right over the top of it, I bet you could see it. But it's got some really low walls tucked amongst a bunch of really high trees. So it's kind of hard to see. We'll see if we can spot it here. But the one that we won't miss is the very colorful National Palace of Pena. And I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I don't speak Portuguese. I know it's kind of similar to Spanish, but I may be saying a lot of these wrong, and I apologize. And there's the palace there. So the Moorish Castle is probably going to be somewhere right around here if we can see it at all. We'll see when we come by there. But the first building on the site of the National Palace was a medieval chapel dedicated to Our Lady of Pena, which was later converted to a monastery in the 1500s. And in the 1700s, the buildings were damaged by lightning and presumably an ensuing fire, although that was not explicitly stated in Wikipedia. Yep, this looks like we're still not quite at the photogrammetry yet. And then the cake was iced for that place during a huge earthquake they had out here that leveled most of the city in 1755. But incredibly, and perhaps miraculously, if I dare say, the main chapel survived most of those calamities, but the rest of it was so badly damaged that the whole place just sat in ruins for over 100 years. Until Ferdinand II decided to take over all the land and rebuild the place into this stunning royal residence that visitors can enjoy touring today, and it looks really cool. Look at this here, some terracing there. Yep, I think we're getting to the photogrammetry here because these buildings look better. Alright, I'm just looking for the blob trees because they seem to extend out kind of far away, but we won't really see any down for the rest of this trip. I don't know why it's just so bad around this mountain here. You know what? I bet that's the Moorish Castle right there. You just couldn't see it from this side because it's kind of tucked down over that ridge there, but I bet that's it. Right there. We're going to take a turn to the right here. We'll see if we can see it any better. I should also mention, by the way, you know, we've got all those flights from 2020 still loaded up on the channel. Any of those flight plans will still work in little NavMap if you want to fly them in 2024. Now that you know how to fix the photogrammetry, I'm sure they'll look just as good, if not better. But if you're going to do that and you have not tried to use and integrate little NavMap for 2024, make sure you watch that recent video because you're going to get really frustrated if you don't know how to fix the issues that you're probably going to have with that. And I'm really glad that map enhancement's working again. That's a great thing. Okay, we got this turn coming up here, and then we should get a really good view of the palace, and it is like at the very top of that mountain, on top of a big rocky outcropping. Looks really cool. I don't know where our man Will is for this trip. I couldn't figure out how to get him to come back in here with us. Alright, coming up wing. Let's see if we can spot it. Yep, look at all these buildings down here. Looks real nice. So if you're wondering about the settings that I've got right now, I had my little frame rate counter up here, but some of the videos it doesn't record. There's the palace there. It's hovering around 40. I've got the terrain level of detail set at 220. All of the animations turned off except for the ships. So no fauna, no people, no planes, no cars, because that's an FPS devourer. And everything else maxed out on Ultra, with the exception of the texture resolution. I saw another video from another YouTube creator that said he was doing some A/B testing on the ground. And when he adjusted that down from Ultra to high, it was like a 10-point jump in his FPS. So I turned that back down to high from Ultra, because it didn't really change anything that I was seeing anywhere, to see if it made a difference, and it did. There's that palace, look at that. If it was on the left side of the plane, of course we'd see it better, but we don't want all the blob trees. You can kind of even see them here. Look at that. This whole mountain's covered with them. I don't know why. But it's pretty good. I mean, for everything set on Ultra, I've got a 3090, so I could probably step it up to a 40 series and just go ahead and max everything out. But I'm not discontent. So this big track right here is called the Estoril Circuit, roughly 2.6 miles in length and home to the Formula 1 Portuguese Grand Prix from 1984 to 96. And I was reading that they used to do a lot of street racing going back to the 1930s in the town of Estoril, which is right down there along the water, just south of the race course there. But when they opened this place in 1972, apparently they put an end to all that, which is too bad, because who doesn't love a good street race through your town? And the track looks really good. They also said that, I don't follow Formula 1 racing, but they said what's kind of unique about this one is there's a lot of up and downhill, and you can kind of see because it dips a little bit here in the middle. So I don't know if that's common or particularly rare, but they happen to draw attention to that in the Wikipedia page, so maybe that's a big deal. They said it has up to a 7% grade, which again, I don't know if that's a lot for a track or not. But it looks good. And I'm not seeing any more blob trees, so maybe we're done with all that. I did turn the live weather off and set it back to July just so we get a little bit more sunlight. The winds were only blowing at about 10 knots up at our cruising altitude here. In fact, let's bring that back down to, I think we can get away with 1500. Let's try it. Let's try it. So I think with this one, I need to set altitude again. Alright, I think that should do it. It's been a while since I've used this old stack. And just keep an eye on that airspeed. Let's bring that power back just a hair there. Right along the coast up here, we're going to see the Casino Estoril, which is going to go right down along to the river the property is. I think it's right about here, and it looks really good too. But they've got a huge garden that looks quite nice in the sim that's going to go all the way down here. And some delightful little details like rocky cliffs and stuff down by the water. They started building the casino itself in 1916, becoming a haven for spies and absconding royals during World War II, and was reportedly the inspiration for Ian Fleming's 007 novel Casino Royale, which I've never read. And today it's one of the biggest casinos on the continent, though I think the gardens are kind of the star of this show out here because they look real nice. So this is the casino, I think, and these are hotels running along the sides of it here. And there's the big gardens there. If you want to fly out this way a little bit more, if you don't mind the blob trees, there's a couple other little forts down there. Most of the forts are going to be pretty hard to spot. I'm hoping we can see them all. There's going to be a couple really big ones that we won't miss. But I've got them all bookmarked, so we'll see how many we can see. The first one is going to be called the Fort of Saint Antonio de Barra, and it was built in the late 1500s. Most of these were built around that time. And it's going to be up on this little point right here. Let's see how these beaches look. Look at that. You can see all the umbrellas and the little people down there. Not the best masking, but not too bad. I don't see any of those fine little lines that we saw in 2020. So this is not the absolute best photogrammetry we've seen, but it is definitely as good as it was in 2020. If not better, because the big spikes aren't out here. But some parts of Europe aren't all that great. You know, London used to look pretty rough. But my benchmark was always, is it as good as 2020? Because there's a lot of places that are far, far better. So that was the only thing I was really asking for. So this little fort up here, built in the 1500s during the Portuguese succession crisis of 1580. It's right behind our pillar right now. Look at these cliffs down here. See that? Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And there's a really long story behind that succession crisis, but I'm only mentioning it as the backdrop to why all these forts are built. This is it right down here. Look at these rocks. Beautiful. And that place was used as a seasonal residence by the last Portuguese dictator out here up until the 1960s, after which it was abandoned and fell into ruin until it was restored by the city and reopened in 2018, which is great. I kind of like the stuff that's like truly abandoned and decrepit because I want it to feel like I'm the next person that went in there after it was abandoned. But the problem with that is eventually if they don't fix it up, it just disappears, which is a problem with a lot of the old U.S. Civil War battlefields here in the States. Since those were all earthworks and wooden forts back then, a lot of them, there's not much left to see. In fact, when we were taking that Charleston tour, I pointed out where Fort Wagner was, which is that big fort at the end of the movie Glory. Not even a speck of that thing left. I don't even know if there's a plaque or anything down there, which is just too bad. This giant fort up here, one of my favorites on this trip, if not my favorite, is the Fort São Julião, considered the biggest and most complete of the old world-style forts still standing in Portugal. And they started that one in 1553 and has been expanded and modified many times over the years. And today you'll see the orange-roofed building right in the middle of it. That is the residence of the Minister of National Defense, which might be the most awesome spot for a house that we've ever seen on this channel. Imagine living on top of a fort. That would be amazing. With a view like that. Look at that thing. Look at that. Awesome. It's got a moat area around it and everything. And there's his house. And unlike most of the forts we get the privilege of exploring here in the sim, this one has actually seen quite a bit of action over the years, a lot of action. In this area back here, I thought that might be an old fort because it's kind of got a ring around it here, even coming to a point. And in Google it says that's the NATO Communications and Information Systems Services Agency. Very long name. And though I tried really hard to figure out what they're doing in there, for probably very good reasons, I couldn't. So I don't know what they're doing in that place. Probably something very covert. Look at that fort. Awesome. We got some sunken marinas here, but I'm sure once Mamie Designs gets his marina pack updated, that'll all be fixed. And now we got all these little river forts coming up here. Let me zoom in a little bit so I can see them as we're coming by here. So, let's see. Where's the first one going to be? It's just so hard to pick them out. I think it's right down here on this little point. Again, these are all really small. This one's called the Fort of Arriero, built in the 1640s during the War of Restoration of Portuguese Independence. In the 20th century, that was home for the Minister of the Army, but now it's slated to be destroyed. This next little spot right here also has a very small one called Fort Oreas, built around the same time as that last one, and that one was restored in 2010. And I read they're currently using it as a retirement home, along with some pretty nice views, I would think. And on this tiny little protrusion we're going to see up here is Fort Guirabita, also the same age as the previous two, and still only in use by the Portuguese Navy. We're going to turn here and then we'll see it. I think it's right here. Oh, they're just so small. We'll see some bigger ones in a little bit. I mean, I mentioned the others. I'll tell you about them as we're coming around doing our satellite map tour at the end. Yep, that's it down there. Very small. This one kind of looks like one of the, in real life, it looks like one of the houses you might see in a place like El Paso, like the Adobe-style houses. It's like that pastel orange color covered in stucco. And then right here, I should have flown a little bit closer. This is a proper-looking fort. It's a star-shaped fort. And that's Sal Bruno. Also appears to be in pretty good shape. And the only time guns were ever fired from that one was when they were using it for some target practice for some big barges they had moored out in the river here back in the 1830s. Only action I ever saw. This thing in here is their National Stadium. Opened in 1953 and still in use for soccer matches. And kind of neat how it's built down in that valley there. Looks like it's got some trees intruding on that side of it over there. And then we've got a couple of towers we're going to see coming up here. The first one will be the very unique-looking VTS tower used by the Port of Lisbon for controlling sea traffic. It was inaugurated in 2001. Here it is right here. See how it's kind of like leaning out over the water? Which is definitely something you don't see very often. In fact, it's so unique that it won some kind of prestigious architecture award in 2003. Check this thing out. This is the one that had the big spike on it before, by the way. Look at that. How cool is that? It's very cool. And then we're going to see a little park on the other side of this marina here where we'll find the Bellum Tower. And that one's from the 1500s and far more ornate than all the other fortifications we've seen around. It looks really cool in real life. It's right... There's going to be a little opening, a little park with an opening. That's it right there. Ooh, it looks like they did it up in the sim too. Look at that. It's really cool looking. This used to be used during the age of exploration and discovery by explorers that were coming and going. It was kind of a ceremonial thing. They would harbor up there, and the royalty would come out and greet them. And originally this was farther from the shore. I guess they've had some silt deposits or maybe land reclamation, but that used to be its own little island. You can see they got a little walkway connecting it to the land there now. But that's really cool looking in real life. I think they touched that up because that looks fantastic. And then up next here, between these two marinas, is something called the Monument to the Discoveries. That's it right there. And that is a second and much larger iteration of an earlier monument that was built for a World Expo they had out here in the 1940s. But that one was subsequently demolished, and that one there that we see was completed in 1960, commemorating 500 years since the death of the famous Portuguese explorer Henry the Navigator, who I would absolutely call Hank if I ever got the chance to meet him. And it's too bad we can't see all the details, because they got a bunch of statues going all up along the sides of it. It's pretty cool. And this giant crossing up ahead is called the 25th of April Bridge. That opened in 1966, not on the 25th of April. And with a span of 3,323 feet, ranks as the 48th longest suspension bridge in the world. Kind of looks like the Golden Gate, doesn't it? It was originally named the Salazar Bridge after the Prime Minister Antonio Salazar, but when his regime was overthrown, they changed it to the current name to commemorate that occasion. That looks fantastic. Look at that thing. I'd hop outside the plane, but I'm not sure that that's mapped correctly on my stick, and I don't want to fiddle around with the keyboard. And then there is the Port of Lisbon, which I would have thought would have been much bigger for an area like this. And they said that's the third largest in Portugal, but when I googled what is the largest port in Portugal, they said it was this one, and pointed me back to the very Wikipedia page that said it was the third largest, so As usual, don't trust anything you hear on this channel, especially not if you've got money riding on being right. As we come around this corner up here, right in this area is going to be a big castle, and I don't know if we're going to be able to see it because it's got a bunch of trees growing up all around it. It's called St. George Castle, and that's one of the oldest spots we're going to see on this trip. There's evidence of human occupation going all the way back to the 8th century BC there. And the oldest structures still standing are from the 2nd century BC, which is pretty dang old. Ooh, they might have touched that up too. You can kind of see it. I wonder if they made that a POI. This is going to be right here. It's kind of gray. We'll see if we can see it out the side. The most ancient remains down there are believed to be Roman, but it was also occupied by the Phoenicians, Visigoths, Moors, and of course the Portuguese, just to name a few. And that thing has been damaged, attacked, rebuilt, and repaired many, many times over the centuries, but it sounds like the general shape of what still stands today was built around the 11th century. That's it right there. Look at that. We can see it. Cool. The area around that took a pretty good beating during that big quake in 1755, and by the early 20th century I read that you could barely even pick it out amongst the skyline. But thankfully, sometime during the 1940s, the government decided to save the place, tearing down centuries worth of annexes and other crap they built all over the top of it. And they say what's still standing down there now looks pretty much like it did in the 1400s. That's cool. I'm glad we can see it. I didn't think we'd be able to, because those walls aren't real high and the trees are real big. That's like borderline blob trees. Pretty close, but I'm not going to declare it. Okay, right over here we have Edward VII Park, named after the Edward VII, the British monarch, who visited Lisbon in 1903. And as you'll see when we come by with its long grassy strip down the middle, it looks a little bit like the mall in Washington, D.C. And I bet it looks pretty good here in the sim too. This is fantastic. It really looks so good. Turn off the dynamic FPS setting. I wish there was just a big disclaimer that would pop up and say, if you want good graphics for the photogrammetry, switch this off. Look at that. I didn't think we'd be able to see that either. They got a big monument down there in that rotunda. Look at that. We're not getting any stuttering anywhere with all these settings set that high. Just fantastic. Okay, some big stadiums we got here. This one on the top, we're going to come around this side, so we're not going to see real. We got this one here, which is going to be come on the other side of the plane, and then this one over here, I'll just tell you what they are. They both look great if you want to fly out there and see them. This is the one that had the other big spike in 2020 on top of that one. The one that's kind of off to the right over here is Jose Alvalde. They opened that in 2003 and is home to the Sporting Club of Portugal soccer team. And the one dead ahead of us now is the Stadium of Light, and that one also opened in 2003. Big year for stadiums. And that's home to the Benfica Soccer Club, or maybe Benfica. Okay, down to our left is a place I would have completely missed if I didn't find it by accident while I was making that recent little NavMap update video. There's going to be a little round building down there called the Fort of Monsanto, one of several built around the city during the late 1800s, and we'll see one more of those in just a minute. This is it right here, right on the top. Today this is used as a maximum security prison, and they had a whole ring of these things at some point. I didn't really look for the others on this side, but there's going to be one more right down here, we'll see. But as I was reading about that, they said it was built in 3 tiers. On the very top, they put the long-range cannons, and then another bank of cannons in the middle for medium-range stuff. And then at the very bottom, they had the infantry that were stacked in there for local attacks if they got too close to the fort. Look at that thing. Now it's a prison, right in the middle of this big, huge park. And this park, by the way, is called Monsanto Forest. They designated it as parkland in 1934 because the whole area had just been stripped bare by years and years of agriculture. So they went on a endeavor to reforest it, and as you can see, it worked. Because that looks good. Pretty good. You know, I might turn this tree... It almost looks like there's just too much tree density. I bet if I turn that down a little bit, it wouldn't look so jammed in. It looks like a head of broccoli or something. Okay, and then right down here is going to be the other defensive ring fort. That one's called Fort Alto do Duque. Also part of that ring when they built the Monsanto fort up there. But today this one's the headquarters of the Criminal Investigation Division of the National Police Force. Which is cool. Look how good all this looks. If it wasn't for... Yeah, look at that. See, we're getting some more of those trees there. I'm sure there's an add-on coming for that. See, that's way too dense. It shouldn't look like that in real life. But the buildings look good. The roads look good. Bridges look great. Forts look cool. There's that thing again. So I wonder what that means, a control... I've never heard of anything like that. Like a control tower for sea traffic. And we've seen a lot of ports on this channel, and I haven't seen anything like that. Maybe they're just in other buildings that aren't, you know, standalones like that in other places. Maybe that's an important thing. Alright, let's see if we can see this final fort up here. It's going to be right down in this tip behind the pillar. There's that big monument to the discoveries. There it is right there. Not quite exactly the same look as that other one, but it was serving the same purpose and built at the same time. Now look at this. These don't look like photogrammetry buildings. And then right over here it's photogrammetry again. That's weird. But whatever. That's not where the good stuff is anyway. Okay, we've got some more landmarks as we set up for final here across the river. Directly across it, along the coastline to our left, will be Fort St. Sebastian. And it's going to be a little bit rough to pick out because it's got trees growing out of it, even in real life. But it's going to be right on the other side of some petrol tanks. These right here, so if we can see it, it's going to be right up in this area right here. That one's also pretty old, going all the way back to the 1500s, and today it is totally abandoned and in very rough shape. But right behind the fort, this orange top thing right here, and I believe it's on the same property, is another building that is very obviously abandoned when we look at it on the satellite map, and I had a tough time finding out what that was until I uncovered a YouTube video that sounds like it's narrated in Russian, and thankfully the closed captioning translated it to English, and I found out it's an old quarantine facility built in 1869 and used to house new arrivals as they were coming to Lisbon by sea. And I'll link that video if you guys want to check it out. It's really well made. And they show the fort too. They do some drone flights over it. So, let's see. There's the fort right there. Yeah, you can see it. You see the little points coming out there? And then there's the quarantine place, which they called an asylum. Look at this. Some more of those trees there. But the petrol tanks look great. The fort looks good. That building looks good. Crane's a little bit iffy. And lastly, to our left, we're going to have a very impressive statue called the Sanctuary of Christ the King. It was inaugurated in 1959 and erected to give thanks for Portugal being spared the ravages of World War II. And they have a big observation deck at the base of the statue. This is going to be right up here. But I couldn't find the exact dimensions of the statue itself. The numbers I could find were all over the place, and some were giving the total height. I don't know what the actual dimensions of the statue are, but it looks really, really cool. So I can't give that to you guys, but I was definitely looking for it. And over here is where the Navy base is, if we could see it. But I think this is also an NSIM-POI, and well, now we'll get a nice look at this bridge too, so it doesn't really matter that we couldn't hop out of the plane. Now that's weird. I wonder why they had that tiny little pocket of non-photogrammetry over there. I was afraid something had gotten shut off. Yeah, see, the only real gripe I've got about this trip is the blob trees. Other than that, it looks fantastic. Look at this thing. That is way up there. One of the numbers I saw was 330 feet. So again, I don't know if that's the total height or just to the observation deck, which would be right around here. That bridge looks awesome though, doesn't it? Check that out. Okay, so as we're coming in for our approach here, look at this. They got a big shipyard up here. Some kind of big moving crane. A few quick announcements. If you want to take this flight plan, again, it will be linked in the video description, along with our bookmark file that will bring in all the bookmarks of all the places we saw on this trip and all other flights we've ever taken. If you don't know how to use little NavMap or bring in and alter the flight plans from that or get them into the sim, check out that recent video that I posted to walk you through all that very quickly. And if you want to be a part of a Discord server, I always endorse doing that, and particularly if you're struggling with issues in the sim. We've got some very smart tech type of guys that have helped me out a lot in there, and it has been very, very beneficial for me. So hop in there, ask any questions if you've got them. All of us would be very glad to help you out. Let's see how this looks down here. And it's just a cool place with a lot of cool people. That looks fantastic. It really does. Look at that. You can see all the cars and everything. That crane looks like a picture. It's so good. Alright, so we'll take the autopilot off here. And of course, now we can fully embrace the quarterly flight plan recommendation competition now that I fear flying nowhere, now that I know everything should look at least as good as it did in 2020. We've already had a lot of recommendations. If there's some spots that you think we just got to check out, hop on the Discord server, look over to the left, you'll see the Suggest a Flight section. Give me the departure airport, ideally, and an arrival airport, a few spots to check out in between if you know of them. Otherwise, just give me a region. That'll be fine. I fly every single one of them. We'll check them out. If I decide to upload the video for it, then you will be entered in the quarterly flight plan competition. If we have too many entries, I'll pick my top 4. At the end of the quarter, we'll vote as a sim community, and the winner will get at least a $50 gift card to the sim vendor of your choice. As YouTube pays me more, and they don't pay me very much, I'm going to start increasing that a little bit just to get everybody on board and excited about it. But I finally started getting monthly checks after 18 months, if you're wondering what it's like to run a simming channel on YouTube. My last check, I think, was $113, which Well, let's just say it's going to take me a really, really, really long time to get back in the black doing this. I'm doing it because I love it, and I love getting to know you guys. So hop in there, check it out. If there's a conversation you'd like to have with me, hop on the Discord server. That's the easiest way for me to do it. I don't mind trying to have a conversation on the YouTube comments. But the way it works is when there's a new comment, I have to approve it because I moderate all the comments because we're starting to get more trolls now. After I have a little fun with them, I block them, but it starts stacking them up and then burying them when I approve it, especially if it's a response to one of my responses. And it's really hard for me to go back in there and find it again. So if you're not afraid of Discord, which you shouldn't be, hop in there. We can have all the conversations you want. We can even hop on a live voice chat if you'd like. We still have a lot of people that are still flying in 2020. Again, totally understand that. We'll probably get our group flights going in as more people migrate over to 2024, which I expect will start happening with a lot more frequency now that things are starting to come together a little bit. So look forward to that. We're going to do a helicopter flight around the Naples area, which we kind of tabled for the launch, but that's still in the hopper. We'll get back into all that stuff. I would say probably by January or February, I'd be shocked if a lot of people are still suggesting that New England goes back to 2020. It's getting that good that fast over here. Again, still not perfect. Definitely not perfect, and still a little bit frustrating. But I kind of like the puzzle now of getting in there, figuring out how stuff works, how to make it work if it's not working right. And I'll try to keep you guys posted on any discoveries that I make, but all of our other creators, thank goodness, are doing a really good job of... I mean, their channels are built around that kind of stuff, so I'm very, very grateful for them. I'm not going to step on their toes. Our wheelhouse is doing the kind of stuff we're doing on this trip. So we'll keep doing it unless it's things that are very germane to what we're doing here, like the little NavMap stuff. I want you guys to be able to do this, get it in there, fly it like we're flying it. I know a lot of you guys like to do that. So if there's something that I figure out that makes that a little bit easier, I'm going to be sure to post it. Again, I feel like the Pappies aren't quite right. I mean, we should be getting at least 2 reds right now, I would think. But maybe not. Maybe I'm just not as great of a pilot as I think I am, as I tell myself I am. You know what? I didn't put any flaps out, so this will be fun. Oh, I had 1 notch of flaps out. Alright, well, we'll probably still be able to get her down. So once we get down, I'll pull over, we'll look at the satellite map, and then we'll wrap up Lisbon. Hopefully I can find a taxiway up here. And we're down. Okay, flaps up. And let's just get our taxi lights on. Taxiway? Are you up here? Oh man, don't tell me I have to go all the way down there. Well, if it's way, way down there, I'll just pull off to the side. I won't make you sit here for 5 minutes while I drive back to the stands. Yep, it looks like it's way down there. Okay, I'm just going to pull off to the right, get out of everybody's way. Not that I have the... Oh, look at that. We do have a little taxiway over here. I have got to adjust the setting on my brakes. I feel like I should be stopping a lot faster than that. I bet I need to adjust that a little bit. When I get those new pedals, I'm going to do that. I'm still waiting for my MFG crosswinds to come in. Hopefully they'll arrive before Christmas. That would be a great early Christmas present to myself. Alright, this looks like it's good enough for now. Well, at low speeds the brakes seem... Maybe that's more lifelike. Maybe they just weren't as lifelike in 2020 and I was used to slamming my face on the glare shield. Parking brake on. Mix cut off. Alright, let's look at little NavMap. Alright, centering off, and we'll take the trail off. Okay, so let's see some of the things that we either couldn't get a good look at or would look a lot better from way close up. So here's the Moorish castle, and you can see the... When we really zoom in, yeah, you can see what it was... So the only area I think that we could really see coming around from the south is this open spot right here. But you can see they do have a big castle structure there, a giant wall. And what's interesting about this, I don't know, there might be a sheer cliff over here, but you can see the wall doesn't go all the way around it. I don't know if it did at one point or if there's just a steep enough cliff there that they didn't need it. But that's really cool. And when Ferdinand took over this area to rebuild the palace up here, he took over this too, so I don't know if he rehabbed that as well or not. I'm sure that didn't sustain any damage during the lightning strike, but maybe. Unless the earthquake messed it up. And then here's the big palace. I wish we could see this from the side. You can kind of see the different colors on it, and if you fly close to it in the sim, you can see that this is all red or orange, and this is yellow. It looks really, really cool. And it's on top of a big... In the sim, this is all rocks. There's really no trees here, so that's not quite true to life, and you'll probably get a little bit of popping with that. I did every time I came by it, but that's worth a nice flight over if you don't mind the blob trees, which you will see if you fly it. And then here's that race course, which looked really good in the sim. Can you see the elevation? Not really from directly above it. From the side, you could tell that there was some inclination on some parts of that. Then we come on down here to the Casino Estoril, if that's how you say that. And yeah, so here's the big casino. It looks like these are hotels, restaurants, shops, probably things like that. There's another hotel, but those gardens look fantastic. There's the beaches with all the little people on them. I'm just looking at the masking here. So it looks like if they would have gone out maybe like another couple hundred yards, it probably would have been pretty lifelike, but it looks like it got cut off because you could kind of see the stuff under the water here a little bit, and then it just faded to the dark color. And here was the first fort, which unfortunately we were just a little bit too far away to really see the details. So this is the one that the guy with the prime minister, the last prime minister, when it was still a dictatorship, was using as a summer residence for a while. And they rehabbed that place fairly recently, I think. And then there's one more little one down here somewhere. Nope, that was the only one on this trip. This is the big boy right here. Look at that. That looked just like that in the sim. Looked fantastic. And that's where the, who is it, the Minister of Defense lives there now? Man, that would be an awesome place to live. I wonder how much of the actual fort is built out since he was living on top of it. I'm sure they let tourists in there, I would think. I don't know. That would be awesome. I wonder if that, how long that has been on top of it. That can't be original, I wouldn't think. And then we come up here to these little tiny, if you see how tiny that one is. This is the one that's slated to be demolished. They built a big wall around it so nobody can get to it, but it's not that substantial anyway. And then here's the one is the old folks home now. That would be a nice spot to retire and die in. If I had to see that view as I was dying, I wouldn't be complaining about that. And then we came up here to these little guys. That's really tiny and really doesn't look like a fort. No wonder we really couldn't see that one. And then this one over here does look like a fort and looks great. And if we were closer, you could probably even see these parapets coming off the sides. That's very cool. And then we came over here to the control tower, which you can kind of see by the shadow. This is the one that's leaning out over the water for all the shipping traffic. That is wild. And I'm so glad they touched that up in the sim. That's cool. And then this is the tower where all the explorers were coming and going back in the 1500s. That's great. I am really glad they modded that up. You got to check out a picture of that from the ground. It's really, really cool. And this thing, the Monument to the Discoveries. And if we really zoom in, all of these things along the side here are all those statues of people going up along the side of it. So this is the one that they rebuilt as a much larger version of the thing that was in the World Expo from 1940. And I think that original one was in a different location. And then they built this one down here, which is a replica, just larger of that one. And this, by the way, is the presidential palace out here, which was kind of buried in all this stuff, so I didn't bother pointing it out. So that's what that is, the Belém National Palace. That's where the Presidente lives. And then there's that. No, that's not the main. Let's see. Let's go back to that stadium because I missed it. This is the one that was tucked up there. This is the National Stadium up here. Well, you know what? They do have trees coming into the side of that, so that was accurate. But that's cool. I like when they build them down. Remember that one in El Paso for the University of Texas out there? It's also built into a bowl like that. I like that a lot. And in Auckland, we saw a lot of those. Very cool. We'll come back to this stuff in a minute. There's the Port of Lisbon, which looked way smaller than I thought, but did look good as far as the ports go. The cranes were pretty good. I've seen a heck of a lot worse in the sim. They weren't all filled in, not totally filled in either of those spots where they probably should have been connected. They weren't, but it looked good enough for me. And pretty soon, all of our boats will be back in our marinas once Mamu gets that squared away, which I'm sure he will soon. And here's Castle St. George. I'm so glad that one got done up too. That's neat. That's the one that's on the spot where things have been going on since the 800s BC, where the old Roman stuff was. And there's a big train station out here. I think that's it. Yep, that's it. And then here's Eduardo the Seventh, or Edward the Seventh Park. Man, imagine that. Come to a country and they name a park after you. And then here's the big stadiums that we really couldn't see because we had to cut around this way. So both of these look fantastic. They're both modded up in the sim. That one's huge and awesome. And I think that they can jam like almost 70,000 people in these. They are huge stadiums. And then here's the other one. And I thought this just looks so cool. This is a shopping mall next to this one. Look at that thing. Awesome. And then here's Monsanto, the one I accidentally found while I was making that little NavMap video. That's the one with the maximum security prison now. And if we had time, which I don't right now, I would look around for some of the other ring forts that supposedly went all around this place. So there's probably another one over here if it's still standing somewhere. We won't look for that now, but here is the other one right down here, which is where the National Police are. That does look a little bit different than the other one, but it is round. That's cool. And right here, this was the area that they dropped the photogrammetry for some reason. I don't know why. Because all this was photogrammetry. All this was photogrammetry. There's just a little band right here that wasn't. But here's the old abandoned fort, St. Sebastian, which actually looked really good in the sim. And you can see the trees just growing out of it. And here's the Ellis Island of Lisbon. Look at that. That's in rough shape. The city can't even tour it now. They won't even let you on the property. But I will link the video for that if you want to see the drone views of it. Really, really cool. And then here's the Christ the King statue, which you really can't see right over the top of it. Yeah, you can't see anything about it. So here's the statue. We're kind of looking at it from the side. And here's the observation platform up here. I don't think there's a revolving restaurant in that, though. Unfortunately, there's that bridge that looked amazing. And let's see if we can see it. Look at that. There's that big crane that they had down there. That thing looked awesome. I kind of wish it would have come over a little bit more, but we were on final for that. That looked cool. And then here's the Navy base. Then we came on in. That was it. And by the way, this is being used today by the Navy. They have 3 squadrons of transport planes and 1 squadron of search and rescue helicopters out here, which is probably what they have parked in all these things. Boy, am I glad I didn't go to the end of the runway, because look how far that next taxiway would have been. But we made it. We're okay. All right, guys, much more to come. I am so excited now that we got everything looking right. I don't care that everything doesn't work right. We can get back to our flights, get back to our tours, get back to business as usual, which makes me very, very excited. Learned all kinds of things. As always, I hope you did too. Check it out yourself. The flight plan will be included in the video description, and I cannot wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.